In this video, I'm going to review and redesign the 2023 Dodge Hornet GT Plus. I'm also going to let you know about my biggest problem with this car, so let's dive into it. Alrighty, so this week we have a look at the 2023 Dodge Hornet GT Plus. This is a pretty funky design to me because it's based on the Alfa Romeo Tonale, but it's missing the key ingredient in the front end, which is the triangular grille of the Tonale. So this looks a little weird in the front end, but more on that later when we talk about the design from a front, side, and rear. And also we need to talk about this interior because this is one of the best gauge clusters right in there. I'm not so sure about the infotainment screen though. We're going to talk about the interior and then of course we're going to take it for a drive. So the 2023 Dodge Hornet GT Plus, as you can see from a side view right here, it looks identical to an Alfa Romeo Tonale, but when you come to the front end, the main ingredient here, as I said, is missing, and that is the triangular grille that we have in the front, because what that does on the Alfa Romeo, it reduces the height of the car. Now here we have a lot of vertical lines going all over the front end, and what this does, instead of cutting the height, it extends the width. So if we look at this front end from a slight side view like this, it feels like it has sort of an overbite, and I'm gonna do a redesign of this because what I wanna do is to make this more into a Dodge and turn it more into a more muscle car feel design than what we have here. This is typical Italian style with the big bubbly surfaces and the soft volumes. What Dodge tried to do here with this design is to make it more American, applying that styling, try to do that onto Italian proportions, and that doesn't always work. So let's turn off the engine here first of all so you can hear me clearly. And yes, we're gonna talk about this gorgeous interior in just a minute. I love pretty much everything about this except maybe that little screen up there, but that's totally fine. More on that in a minute. Let's see what we got up front. We do have full LED headlights, which I like. It's classy, it looks clean. We have this nice chamfer going down here, this big LED indicator up here. This is also the daytime run light. And we have functionality in the grille. So this is completely open up here. You also have some slots down low below that with the front mounted camera on this car. And this is $40,000. So I do think still, it's a good value for what you get. Further down low, we do have some openings here in the middle. We also have the radar for the cruise control, and we have some parking sensors. This is covered up, and this entire piece on the side is also covered up. I would definitely want to have this be open, or at least make some sort of function here. Maybe add some lights here or something like that. Not just have a big plastic piece like we have here. Overall, I do think what Dodge had to work with is cut some costs and save a lot of money to take the Tonale and apply their own design onto it. I do think they did a good job because you're very restricted in what you can do. These are also functional, so we have some heat extractors up here on the hood. So let's pop the hood and let's see what's hiding under there. I also like the red logo in the front end. This white on black, this has this blacked out package as well, which means that some of the features on the exterior are blacked out. For example, this trim around the greenhouse, the side mirrors are blacked out as well. And as you can see, everything in the front end, the plastic is also black. Looks good with the white exterior. Pop in the hood, we do have a 2-liter inline-4. It's a Hurricane Turbo charged engine. You have 268 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque connected to a 9-speed automatic. They didn't go with the 8-speed. They figured they needed the extra gear for some reason, but it's a pretty interesting driving experience. It drives really well. In this case, we also have all-wheel drive. Fuel economy comes in at about 21 city and 29 highway, and the price for this is going to be just over, as this one is spec'd, is just over $40,000. I think it's $40,215 or something like that. So let's close this back up and let's have a look at the proportions from a side view. And this is, I think, where the Hornet shines. Not a lot of differences here or in the rear from the Alfa Romeo Tonale, which I also reviewed here on the channel, which I think is a fantastic looking machine. The only thing I would switch out here, you see these wheels with the blacked out package? These wheels, I'm not sure if they're completely black, but they are 18 inches. Let's see where we have the sizing for it here. 225/55 18s. I would definitely want to put 19s on this and not in black. Another change I want to do here is to make this white in body color, because this is supposed to be a sporty car. It's not supposed to be marketed as an off-road crossover. It's more of a sporty crossover. So definitely make this entire side skirt down here, make that white as well in combination with the white plastic around the wheel arches. I think that would look so much better. You can see that we do have an indicator integrated in the side mirror. We also have the camera here for the 360 view. Gonna show you that in a minute. And we have a bit of a black angry Hornet on the side. I do like this logo. It's a clean looking logo, and I'm also glad that they made that black, because everything else is contrasting the white on this car. The proportions, as I said, look very, very good. We have the typical Italian curvatures. We have a nice shoulder line cutting right through here, coming back above the rear axle, creating a muscle over this area. Look almost a little bit Porsche Macan-like in the rear end, which is not a bad thing at all. So a couple of things I will change here. Make this white, switch out the wheels to 19s and silver wheels for something else than black. Now coming around to the rear end, we do have the wiper visible here. Totally fine for me. I don't really care about that in this $40,000 price range. And I think this is probably the best view. It is the best view for the, I was gonna say Tonale, but the, but the Hornet. Definitely the rear end with this rather beautiful taillight situation that we have. So you have a full LED bar across the entire rear end, and other than the internal pieces, for example the LEDs here, other than the change here, this is also exactly the same styling as you have on the Tonale, where we have 3 slots like this. Instead here we have one single big LED. I do like this because it's thin here, has this 3D effect, and then you see this indicator sits deep within the LED, looking nice. And we also have a bit of a thicker piece in the corner. So we have a thick piece here with these stripes, then going into a thinner piece, connecting everything with the Dodge logo in the middle, breaking up this line, and then coming back, of course, the same on the other side. One thing I'm not so sure about here in the rear end, you see this black piece, this bumper. It's not a diffuser, it's the entire bumper is all blacked out, and how it cuts in to the white piece of bumper as well to house the license plate here. I'm not so sure if I want to have this like this, or if I want to make this entire piece body color. Smoother integration of the license plate holder. I also would like to have the exhaust pipes visible, because as you can see, we don't see any sort of exhaust pipe. And this is it's a Dodge. It's supposed to be sporty, add as much as a muscle car feel as you can onto this. And I think adding the exhaust pipes being visible, one on each side, symmetrical, of course, would be a benefit for this design. You also have the rear mounted camera located right there. So let's open this up and let's see what we got inside. As you can see, the roofline here is pretty sloped, so that's definitely going to take away a lot of the space that you have in here, but still you do have plenty of space, and you have some space underneath here as well with an air compressor if you do get a flat. You have a 12-volt outlet, secret outlet right there. And if you need more space, you can always fold down these rear seats, little compartment here. If you fold down the armrest in the middle, you can put some skis in here. Pretty standard size for this type of package, I would say. So let's close this back up, and it is power assisted. There are a couple of features in this car for the price that I think is fantastic. $40,000, and you do get a lot of luxury features in this car. Let me know what you think about this design. Do you think it was a good idea for Dodge to essentially take the Alfa Romeo Tonale and just slap their Dodge badge on it to make a couple of changes to the front end and call it a day? Overall, as I said, for what they had to work with, I do think they did a pretty good job. So now let's jump into the best part of this car, and that is the interior. Now the reason I love this interior, let's turn this beeping noise off. We don't need to film the exterior anymore, so we can turn the lights off. It's just a beautiful looking interior. The overall positioning of everything and the seats, the materials look more expensive than what this car actually is. You see, we have some nice styling here, leather wrapped armrests, we have some red stitching, we have a premium sound system as well, and the materials just feel nice in everything. The clicks and the feel for everything just feels quality for this interior. So let's jump in here and have a look at what's going on with this gauge cluster, which is definitely my favorite piece of this interior. It does have everything that I want in a gauge cluster. We have, of course, 12.3 inch, it's completely digital. And you do know I do love my housings for the gauge cluster. So we have proper housing here, or dual housing, not really soft touch material up here, but it's not hard plastic either. The hard plastic comes back in this shelf. So look at this, we have a fully customizable gauge cluster. So we have, you see that it lights up a little bit when I click this button, and that is the area that you're going to configure. So you can configure the center to have speedometer, you can have a bunch of different settings here, messages, driver assist, and so on. And if we click the sport button, it's going to turn into a completely different tachometer and speedometer with a bit more of a sporty feel to it. Again, we can also customize this side of the gauge cluster to have whatever info we want there. Now, if I don't want to have the big map in the middle, we can go back to that and customize this to have a bullseye. Since we are in the sport mode, this is actually a G meter, which is pretty funny to have in this type of vehicle. So gauge cluster is spot on for me. It just looks nice. The graphics, high resolution for everything that goes on in here, and it is customizable to the point where I want it to be. I can have the map basically take up the entire space. Now, the thing I don't like about this interior, if you look at this right here, this integration of the infotainment screen feels like a properly lazy way of integrating a 10.2 inch infotainment screen. I would love to see some sort of housing here, maybe melting into this area of the dashboard. This feels like I can just grab it and just pull it off the dash if I wanted to. However, the system, I think this is a Uconnect 5 system. So if we go over what's going on in here, you have a bunch of different settings, and this is another feature that I think is great that you have in this price range. You have heated and ventilated seats in 3 different levels. Now I'm gonna turn it into 1 because it's getting pretty warm in here, even though it's about to snow anytime now. We also have ventilated seats, and we have a heated steering wheel. So you get all the features that you really need in a car like this for $40,000. I do think that's a great value. Further down, we do have this integration of these air vents, and I do think this is beautiful because this feels nice. It looks like quality material too, even though this is plastic. It does have some nice textures to it. And in addition to that, we have this large array of all these physical knobs and toggles and buttons to adjust whatever you want. This is a temperature right here, and you can see all the climate control settings here. Fan speed, up and down. I do wish this could be one button like we have here. Up, down for cooler temperatures, up for heated. We could just have the same feeling here for fans instead of having 2 different ones. Up for more fan speed, down for less fan. You can also go into this vehicle setting here up in the infotainment screen, and you have a bunch of different settings here as well. Further down, we do have a big start button here. We have a 12-volt old school cigarette outlet right there. 2 USB, 1 USB-C, 1 regular USB, and we have this is a dedicated spot for your phone. This is the wireless charger here. And your phone is definitely not going to go anywhere. It's rubberized. It also has these ridges on the side to keep your phone in place. Off button for the automatic shut off for the engine. I want this to always be off, but I do think you have to turn this off every single time you start the engine because it's going to reset to be on. Now you have a pretty old school layout for the gear selector here. Putting it into reverse, you can pop up the 360 camera, which is another feature that is great to have. Again, in this price range, you have nice cameras, both front and side, with the fisheye lenses if you want to, and the trajectory lines for when you're turning and when you're reversing your car, making sure you don't hit that little truck that sits up there. Maybe the resolution could have been a little better than this, but again, it's a rear view camera and you're not really gonna take this off-road, so you don't need to see every single little pebble on the road. You also have traction control on and off, parking sensors on and off, parking brake right there, on and off, volume control.
The big President's Day sale with amazing savings and financing up.
Got amazing savings these days. We have 2 cup holders back here, and this is a detail that I love because when I got into this car, the armrest was right here, which feels like my elbow is like almost slipping off here. So I'm glad that you can actually pull this forward and that makes it a lot more comfortable to just drive for longer trips. If we fold this up, you're gonna see that we have a tiny little storage compartment. It's pretty deep, but it's not that big. Moving on to the seats, and these are some properly bolstered seats. And as you can see, we have the perforation in it for the heated and ventilation functions on these seats. But look at these bolsters here, beautifully done. We also have the Dodge logo embroidered in the headrests, looking nice. Power adjustable, of course. Looking up top, we have a couple of buttons here, light buttons right here, for example, but we don't have any sort of sunroof. And as you know, if you watched my reviews before, totally fine with that. I actually prefer to have a solid roof like we have up here. This steering wheel, very much Italian steering wheel on this design. This is straight from Alfa Romeo. They did change the buttons for it to make it more Dodge, and also, of course, the logo in the middle. It would be weird to still have the Alfa Romeo logo in the middle. We have this big sport button here, which makes it a little bit more, when you drive it in sport, it makes it more responsive on the throttle. That's the main difference that I notice when I have it in sport. On the right side, you do have the controls for the volume. Still have the volume controls right here. And we have the toggle for the radio. You also have this button, as we talked about, to customize whatever you want in the gauge cluster. It's just such a beautiful gauge cluster, this thing. On the left side, you have the controls for the cruise control settings and the driver assist modes. Further down here on the left, you do have the knob or the toggle for the light situations. You can also open up the trunk by clicking this button. Overall, for what you get for this price, this is one of the best interiors for $40,000. But with that said, let's jump into the back seat, because I actually have not been in there yet. So I'm 6'1", this is my driving position right here, so let's see if I can fit behind myself back here. And let's see what kind of features we have back here as well. So the door, start with the door, looking pretty similar to what we have up front with the red stitching here. Nice material, sound system as well. Overview of the back seat, looking nice. I do like the design of these seats themselves, both in the front and in the rear. So sitting back here behind my 6'1" driving position, if I have my legs straight, I can still fit pretty comfortably. But if I move my legs as I normally would if I sit back here, just to the sides of the front seat, I'm definitely way more comfortable like this. We have a pocket down here. We have a couple of USBs here, USB-C, USB. We also have the same light knobs and buttons and feelings that we have in the front end. And last but not least, if we fold down, we even have a nice handle for it here. So if you really want your cup holders, it's very easy to just grab this handle and fold this down, and boom, you have yourself 2 cup holders. Even though we do have a sloping roofline here, you see how much it slopes down? I still have plenty of headroom in here. There's no problems at all to fit back here, whether it be leg space or head space. So well done, Alfa Romeo and Dodge. Alrighty, let's take the 2023 Dodge Hornet GT Plus for a drive. Hurricane Inline 4. I love the names of Dodge engines. Hurricane Inline 4. Turbocharged on this gravel parking lot, which is pretty rough, but the ride is still pretty smooth, to be honest. We do have 18-inch wheels, so the tires are pretty thick still. 268 horsepower in this package. This could be if they just lowered this a little bit and painted, of course, the plastic around the wheel arches, this could be you could consider it being a hot hatchback because of the size of it. It's not a big car, so 268 horsepower, 0 to 60 in about 6.5 seconds, which might not sound like a lot in today's standards, but it still feels relatively quick when you're stepping on it, because the smaller the car, the more, sensation of speed you get. It is a weird car though, because it has, it is an Alfa Romeo underneath. And I don't think Dodge has ever taken, and imagine them taking the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, for example, and just slapping a Dodge badge onto that. It just would not work, because the design is so not Dodge at all. But here, it feels like, as I said, they took the they tried to make the Tonale into a Dodge by just fiddling around with one single element, and that is the front end design, and that is what I wanted to redesign into more of a muscle car feel for this car and separate it more from the tonality. But then if you would do that, that would ruin the whole concept of what this car is supposed to be. So we're coming out to the road here, and let's step on it and let's see what this inline 4 can do. All-wheel drive, 0 to 60, 6.5 seconds. We are going uphill a little bit, so as I said, it feels pretty fast. It's a fun car to drive. I think that has to do with the package and the overall sizing of this car. But the area where this car shines to me is going to be the interior. I just love this gauge cluster, and this is what I want to see. We do have, if you want it to be, you can make it look like a traditional old analog gauge cluster with 2 dials, the tachometer, speedometer. Or if you want to, since it is all digital, you can have the map take up pretty much the entire screen. And it's so high resolution, it looks nice when you have it specifically in sport. Everything becomes red and it looks beautiful. But the main thing here that I want to change is going to be this infotainment screen, because just look at how lonely it feels up here. It feels like this car is not supposed to have an infotainment screen, and the designers just thought, wow, we just forgot the infotainment screen and we need to put it somewhere, so let's just add it on here and just put some glue on back on the back side and then call it a day. It's interesting that I don't have any sort of paddles in a Dodge Hornet. I do get it in the Alfa Romeo Tonale. And again, that's another reason why this car is weird to me, because it's supposed to be a Dodge, and Dodge to me has always had this sporty vibe to it. But we don't have the exhaust pipes visible on this. We do have that on the Tonale. We don't have the paddles either, which we also have on the Alfa. So there are a couple of things that don't really make sense styling-wise. I want to have body color on the exterior all around, the black plastic pieces on the side specifically. And I also want to have some sportier attributes on the inside. For example, the paddles. But it would just add to that sporty vibe that you should get, in my opinion, from a Dodge. The ride, even in sport mode, is pretty comfortable. Not too bad at all. It is a rather smooth pavement here, so we don't have any big imperfections in the road, so it's pretty hard to tell. But it doesn't feel too stiff, and that's not what you want in this car either. This is a perfect balance between sport and comfort. Brakes feel fine too, not too spongy and not too abrupt in its operation. It feels exactly as you would expect them to feel and stops the car nicely. Overall, this car to me is a very, very good example of how much small details, specifically graphic details in design matters. If you look at this front end, compare it to the Alfa Romeo Tonale. Tonale just looks like a completely different car, even though they're essentially the same car. But what makes the Alfa Romeo look so much better than this, even though this is not ugly in any way, but it just looks not as good as Alfa Romeo, is the big grille that Alfa has in the front end. Because Alfa designers, they had that grille in mind when they designed the overall proportions in the front end. When you take that away, the proportions get a little messed up in the front end, specifically of the Dodge Hornet, and it feels to me like it has this overbite to it. But other than the exterior design and specifically the front end, the interior still looks fantastic. The equipment level you get in this price range is also really great. Overall, I do think it's a good car if you want a sort of a sporty SUV to take you from point A to point B.